So the Vampire Hunter D universe is basically the real world, but at the turn of the century, Y2K really happened. The world nuked itself into oblivion. The vampires, though, foresaw these events through like black magic and clairvoyance and other dumb crap like that. So before the bombs actually dropped, they built bunkers and stuff. So after humanity mostly destroyed itself, the vampires came out and took over the world. They enslaved humanity and started calling themselves nobles instead of vampires. The nobility completely took over the world, and for thousands of years they ruled over the earth. Humanity was completely subjugated in both body and mind. The nobility were these wondrous, horrific creatures that mastered pretty much all the arts and sciences. They did a lot of stuff, one of which was experimentation on humanity. They literally changed our psyches and our biology to suit their needs. Some of the stuff they did was actually beneficial to the human race, such as completely eliminating genetic diseases. One example I can cite from the books is the fact that if incest creates offspring in this universe, it does not produce genetic diseases. The main thing they did, though, was imprint a deep fear of the nobility inside humans. Fearing the nobles is ingrained into their DNA. It's so entrenched that it's basically a primal instinct. They also tampered with human minds. Despite all their technology and their knowledge, the nobles somehow couldn't explain why they have particular weaknesses. For instance, they can't explain why sunlight will disintegrate them. They can't explain why they're repulsed by garlic. They can't explain why they have problems with water. And they can't explain why a cross creates an intense sensation of pain. The nobility can't explain their weaknesses or figure out any way to remove them, so they did the next best thing. They actually manipulated human brains so that if a human ever discovered one of their weaknesses, their mind would force itself to forget the information. So a human might accidentally repel a vampire attack if they just so happen to have garlic nearby or a cross-shaped object. But as soon as they realized the nobility were weak to them, they would forget what they had discovered. The nobles also took it upon themselves to create monsters for their own amusement. They created sentient deserts, snake lady hyenas, hydras, pretty much any monstrosity they felt like Dr. Moreauing. There are also real-life monsters that the nobility didn't create, but brought to the surface. This basically means that the Vampire Hunter D universe is just strewn with all these horrific monsters just prowling around, perfectly content to sit around and tear apart any human that happens to get by them. All that aside, the nobles ruled Earth until one day war broke out with OSBs. OSB stands for Outer Space Beings, and is a much cooler name than aliens or any other name for extraterrestrials. Anyway, the vampires fought aliens for a super long time until the war kind of ended in a standstill. By this time, the nobility's numbers had dwindled enough that humanity decided they could revolt. So the worthless peon humans finally rebelled and fought their masters to the brink of extinction. So now humans rule the earth again, but there are still a ton of vampires out there, scattered and just doing their own thing. Some of them rule human settlements, some just sleep indefinitely, others chill in their castle until they decide to feed, but by and large the vampire race is still feared, although relatively rare. So the humans call this post-apocalyptic crap hole they live in the frontier, and they treat it like it's sci-fi cowboy times. There are saloons and wagons and sheriffs and, helio rifles and other crap like that. The greatest city is called the capital, which is actually the former center of life for the vampires. The remnants of the nobility's greatest city is now the capital of all human life. Apart from that, there are mostly random villages and small towns that comprise the majority of human settlements. Frontier life itself is pretty much non-stop danger. You have to be on constant watch for all the horrific monsters that are always prowling around, and if you're not in danger from them, you're in danger from other people. The frontier is a terrible place to be. You'd think that in a post-apocalypse people would band together for survival, but really people are just terrible to each other. There are all these roving bandits and other people that just go around killing and thieving and even raping and all these other horrible things. So if you're not in danger from monsters or the terrain itself, you're in danger from other people. Some people make a living as hunters, which is where they specialize in hunting a particular kind of creature. So for instance, there are werewolf hunters and different kinds of things like that. The main character, of course, is a vampire hunter, which means that he goes around and hunts vampires. That's the world, that's the backstory, that's the history of the frontier, the place where D is going from town to town and taking contracts to kill vampires.